All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to day 2 of our sessions on mountain glaciers and snow. Today, we have a pretty interesting panel discussion and a keynote speaker before that. We'll be talking about the changing cryosphere focused on the Hindu Kush Himalaya. And as some of you might already be aware, the region is one of the regions with one of the greatest ice reservoirs outside of the Arctic and Antarctic regions as well. So I'm Shiva. I'm a graduate student studying glaciers and flood risk at Georgia Tech, and I'll be introducing some of our speakers today. To start with, we have a keynote from Dr. Miriam Jackson, who is the Eurasia and Nordic Director at ICCI. She has extensive experience working with ICIMOD and is also an IPCC lead author on the Hindu Kush Himalaya sort of chapters of the special report on the cryosphere in a changing climate. And following that, we'll have a panel discussion with experts from various regions of the ICIMOD member countries, which will be moderated by Dr. Sher Mohammed, and I'll let him introduce the rest of them as we go along. So, Dr. Jackson. Switch.
Well, they're getting a good morning, everybody. I was actually at ICIMOD until just a few weeks ago. So I was living in Kathmandu and leading the cryosphere work at ICIMOD. So I've been involved with ICCI a little bit for a while, but I just started on the 1st of October as the Eurasia and Nordic Director for ICCI. And I also have a position with the Norwegian government as well as a research scientist. So what I want to do today is not go into a detailed presentation, but just give you a few of the important topics to think about how the changing cryosphere is affecting downstream communities in the Hindu Kush Himalaya. So every year, this is how much ice we're losing from mountain glaciers. We have mountain glaciers in many parts of the world. As Shiva said, in the Hindu Kush Himalaya and Central Asia, that's the biggest volume of ice outside the polar region. But on pretty much every continent, you know, in the European Alps, in the Andes, in North America, the cryosphere is very important. And this affects the water supply. The changing cryosphere has many effects on downstream communities, but the most important one is probably the water supply, and that is changing as the cryosphere is changing. And there's also several hazards involved as well. And these, of course, are also a major problem because sometimes the hazards are happening in places where you didn't get these hazards before. If you know an area is hazardous, you don't live there. If the hazards are changing, then you could end up living in somewhere that really you shouldn't be living because the cryosphere, you could be exposed to floods or to ice avalanches or different things like that. And what struck me a few weeks ago is WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, came out with a new report. The report was actually on water resources, global water resources. That was the focus. And yet the report really, at least the key messages from the report, really concentrate on cryosphere because the water resources are changing globally, and much of the biggest changes and the fastest changes, so in other words, changes that are very hard to adapt to because they're fast, are because of the changing cryosphere. And this is also showing you how much the cryosphere has been changing in the Northern Hemisphere and what we're looking at in the future. Now, this depends what we do. You know, we could get the increase continuing, but possibly leveling off after a while, or we could get this really steep increase that, to be honest, would be almost impossible to adapt to. So this is really up to us, you know, what the scenario looks like in the next few decades. And this is just, I'm going to talk about the Hindu Kush Himalaya. I think probably most people here know where it is. But in order to study glaciers, we divide the world in different regions. So if you look at the red over on the right, regions 13, 14, and 15, this is what we studied in a recent HighWise report, which ICIMOD produced, and where I was one of the editors and chapter lead authors. And here now you see these different regions. 13, 14, and 15. Now, I know this looks quite complex, but what you want to look at in this figure is that if the glaciers are getting bigger, if they're increasing in size, you're going to see blue. If the glaciers are decreasing in size, you're going to see red. Then this is looking actually at 3 periods. So my question then is, what do you see on the graph? Do you see a lot of red or a lot of blue? I think we all see red. It's, you know, there's one little bit we call the Caricom anomaly. Otherwise, the glaciers are really decreasing. The other thing about this figure is it looks at these 3 different periods, 75 to 99, 2000 to 2009, and 2010 to 2019. So how are things changing as we go from left to right? Are things improving, or are they getting worse? I mean, we can really see they're getting worse, especially if you look at Bhutan, the Eastern Himalaya, Brahmaputra. You know, there's been a huge increase in how fast the glaciers are changing. In fact, in the last decade, the melt from glaciers was 2/3 higher than in the previous decade. So things are changing very fast. What happens to the water as the glacier gets smaller? This is something that's a little bit complex. Do we get more or do we get less? The answer is both. As the glacier shrinks, you get more and more runoff. This sort of makes sense. As the glacier, you can't keep on going with that. You can't keep on having more and more water. You get to a point where the glacier is so small that the water starts to decrease. So this is something that downstream communities need to adapt to. Not more water, not less water, but both. In some parts of the world, again, the European Alps, we've gone past this. They're pretty much now on the downward trend of getting less water. In the Hindu Kush Himalaya, we're still going up. We're getting more water, but we can't assume that's going to continue. After about 2050, we're going to start getting less water. So this is quite a complex idea to get across, that we need to be prepared for both. Not just in terms of water resources, irrigation, also hydropower. There's a lot of hydropower in the HKH, and you have to build that with, you know, at least a 20, 30-year perspective. And there's also several risks. You can see here that in a sort of a mountain setting, you might have glaciers. What happens when glaciers shrink? Often you get a lake being formed. The lake could be at the side, it could be in front, but as the glacier gets smaller, often the lakes get bigger. And there have been many of these events where these lakes are flooded. We also have avalanches. As the cryosphere is changing, we can get more avalanches. We can get avalanches in different places, perhaps. We could also get fewer avalanches in some places. We could also get more wet snow avalanches. And we also get changes in the permafrost. At high elevation, it's very cold. The ground is frozen. As the temperature increases, the ground's not frozen anymore. And this causes landslides and many other problems. And you see here, oops, sorry. On this slide, we're not just looking at the hazard. We also have to look at the exposure and the vulnerability. If you have a flood that could happen and 2 people are affected, there's not much exposure. Or you could get quite a small flood and lots of people affected, a lot of exposure, and also vulnerability. How well are people able to adapt to these? Do they have insurance? So these are the things we have to consider from a risk perspective, not just a hazard, but also the people exposed. And I'm going to give you one example. I don't want to go into too much detail, but the Kabul River Basin, Afghanistan, we tend to forget when we're talking about changes in the Hindu Kush Himalaya. But actually, Afghanistan is one of the most exposed countries and also one of the most vulnerable and the least able. And you can see here what happens. You know, depending on what we do here, how the emissions go, we're going to see changes in precipitation. Hard to say if it's increasing or decreasing, but probably more variability. Again, that's hard to adapt to. And also increasing temperatures, either quite a lot or a huge amount. So this is looking at floods in Afghanistan, and each year about 100,000 people are affected. This has high costs. This is actually from a study done by the World Bank. And one example given here is the May 2014 floods in the northern province, with a lot of people affected, a lot of people who had to move internally mainly, and also a huge amount of damage. Obviously, Afghanistan's not a rich country. Most of the countries in the Hindu Kush Himalaya aren't. But these are the kinds of costs that we're looking at. We could also look at avalanches. So about 2 million people in Afghanistan are exposed to avalanches. The assets, again, we're talking about billions here. And in 2015, over 300 people were killed. So these things you don't hear about as much. Things happening in China and Nepal you hear a little bit more about, but Afghanistan you don't hear about, but it's very exposed to changes in the cryosphere with huge economic consequences. Another thing that could happen is ice avalanches. We've seen some of these smaller and bigger. We've actually also seen glacial detachments. So this happened in Tibet a few years ago. And this is one that happened in Kyrgyzstan in 2022. And it just shows you the power. This was actually just a small part of the glacier that broke off. And you can see how much power is behind this. This is actually quite a popular area for trekking. So trekking brings in a lot of tourism, quite a lot of money. And these are the kinds of hazards that people are going to be exposed to. So you can really see here the force. And as you're sitting here, we're looking at this video, somebody obviously filmed this, and the avalanche is getting nearer and nearer. And to me, this is what we're doing with the climate. Sitting here watching it, the changes are getting nearer and nearer, and we're not doing anything till it's too late. So this is, I think, a very good analogy of how we're reacting to what we know is coming. So I mentioned the floods from glaciers. As the glacier gets smaller, you get glacial lakes being formed. And there's actually thousands of these lakes over the Hindu Kush Himalaya. And there's different options you can do. In one or two places are being drained, but the lakes are often at high elevation. It's very difficult access. I know in Bhutan, in Lunana, where there's been at least one major GLOF and other ones, they had, I think, about 300 people going there 4 years in a row. So draining these lakes isn't a minor thing. And often the communities downstream, they may not even know there's a lake being formed. It could be many days' walk from where they live. And they generally have a very close connection to the community. So they don't want to live. They want to, live where they've lived all their lives and where their families are. So how do you deal with this? And this is a study that ICIMOD did a few years ago. And you can see here just the figures from it, how many GLOFs have been. This probably isn't the correct number because we don't always know, especially going back several decades, was a flood a GLOF? Or perhaps if no one survived, there's no one to tell you about it. So this is a minimum number of the number of GLOFs that have happened. This is just the ones we know about. The number of people that have died and been displaced.
500 years.
Yeah. And obviously, if you go back a few hundred years, we didn't have the information. So I say, I'm sure there's a lot more that we don't know about. One of the interesting things about GLOFs is the cryosphere doesn't recognize national boundaries. The cryosphere often marks the national boundary. Often the national border is at the highest point. So that's where the cryosphere is. And this is one that occurred in 2016. I keep saying 15. 2016. It's from a small lake called Gongbatongshad. I assume someone here knows where that is. Check it. Okay, so this lake is in China, but the damage was in Nepal. This is another challenge when you're looking at downstream hazards. The hazard might be in a different country, so that makes it even harder to do anything about the hazard, like draining the lake or putting in early warning systems. So this is what we're looking at in terms of the glacier melting. Again, depending on the emissions, we're either looking at losing a fairly substantial chunk of the glaciers or most of the glaciers, up to 80%. Very quickly, I want to say something about snow. It's a little bit harder to study than glaciers because it's a little bit more ephemeral, but in many of the basins in the HKH, they're actually more dependent on runoff meltwater from snow than from glaciers, and we just don't have as much information about it. So we do know that it's going to decrease, but it's probably also going to be more variable. Again, this variability is very hard to adapt to. And yeah, in Helmand, it's 77%, 40% in the Indus, but I think in the upper Indus, it's even more. And that could also have the kind of peat water that as the snow cover decreases gradually, You could get more for a while as some of these big snow patches melt. And it's going to really affect people. It's going to affect the agriculture. So this is some of the things that we're looking at in the Hindu Kush Himalaya. And, you know, hundreds of millions of people are going to be affected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for providing this broad overview of how Cryosphere is changing in the HKH region. So this will also set the stage for our panel discussion. We have 4 distinguished panelists from our 4 regional member countries, including Bhutan, China, Nepal, and Pakistan. So I would request all of them to come to the stage for the panel discussion. So from Bhutan, we have chairing Dendup. He is the head of planning and policy division of Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. He is known for being expert in development plans and policies. He is also known for contribution in the 13 5-year plan of rural government of Bhutan. He comes from a place where climate change has impacted him and his family. He will talk about it later. And we have from China, we have another colleague, Professor Wen Jiedong. He is the dean of Sanjay Sun University. He works in climate dynamics, climate change, and he has an extensive experience. He is also the lead author of IPCC, and he is also from the mountainous region, so he will also share some of his experiences that he observed. The third speaker is panelist is Muhammad Arif Guhir. He is the executive director of Global Climate Change Impact Study Center in Pakistan. He has also an extensive experience. He also is leading the GHG inventories and also the NDCs, and he has an extensive experience as a lead author and a reviewer for UNFCCC, UNEP, FAO, WMO, and he is also the UNFCCC chair for consultative group of experts. And we have from Nepal, we have Dr. Sindhu Prasad Dunganaji. He is Joint Secretary, Chief of Climate Change Management Division, Ministry of Forest and Environment. He is also the national focal point to FCCC. He closely worked with Mountain Partners, ICCI, and on part of the government support research on Cryosphere in Nepal and high mountain Asia. So I welcome you all to this panel discussion. I will come closer to you so that you clearly hear me. I think the first row. Yes. So I'll first start with Dr. Sindhu. He has another commitment after 10:30, so we requested him to join for the initial session. So he also closely worked with communities, and he has an extensive experience how these climate change is affecting communities in mountainous region in Nepal. So I would like to ask him about what are the major challenges that are posed by climate change and cryosphere changes that are affecting people in the Himalaya mountains of the Nepal region.
Thank you, Sir Mohammed. Good morning, everyone. I work for the government of Nepal, and you all know Nepal is a mountainous country. About 85% of the total country's land area is mountain. So, and also it has the highest mountains in the world. That's why, you know, all the high mountains, they are snow-clad, and they feed into the river. And then we also rely on the snow-clad mountains because rely on the river for cleaner energy like hydropower, which is the basis for us to implement our NDC. We have proposed we would be producing 15,000 megawatts of hydroelectricity by 2030. That is our NDC target, and our NDC 3 will be more ambitious. And we target it because of the high mountain rivers. If the glacial is melting and the snow is melting, and if there is no glaciers, and then our major target, our ambition to tackle the climate change will be imperial. And then this is the bigger thing. But the major thing, the major challenge we have in the country is people live in the high mountain areas. And we don't want people migrate from high mountains to the city and or lowland because it is already overpopulated. That's why we don't want to over migration. And but people cannot stay because we are already starting to face the GLOFs. We were trying that there is a risk of a GLOF, and then we have already experienced GLOFs. In last August, we had a GLOF, but fortunately it was a daytime. That's why the whole village was swept away, but not a single person died because it was a daytime. They could run away. Well, had it been during the night, so there would have been more disasters. So that's why. And then, thanks to ICIMOD, that is carrying out research in high mountain areas, in glacial, snow. And I found that every year the snow is thinning 1 meter by 1 meter. It's not 1 centimeter, it's 1 meter. So it means there is a great threat, and then this is a common sense. It has not been rocket science any longer. When the snow melts, and then it goes to it forms the glacial lakes, and then if there is more water, the glacial lakes overflow, and then that creates the GLOF, and all the downstream people are affected. So that's why we are very serious about the preservation of snows and glacials. So we urge the global communities. The 1.5 degree is the bottom line. Even 1.5 degree is not sufficient. If you ask us, because only 1.5 degree has increased, and then the GLOFs started. It means even 1.5 degrees would be less than 1.5 degree. So that is our urge to local community, to global communities, and also I would like to request the scientific communities like ICCI to provide more information about how we can create some early warning system. That is very important to us. Thank you very much.
As a follow-up question, since you mentioned the Tamil flood that happened in this in the Everest region, and also the potential impacts of GLOF and other climate hazards. So, and also you talked about how we can tackle, we should reduce the global emission and limit the temperature, climate warming to 1.5 degree. So what should we do as a scientific community and also in the national, what is the key to do on the ground with communities and policy by the national policies and also with the regional and global entities to reduce the vulnerabilities and risks?
Thank you. Actually, our urge to global communities is to reduce the temperature, to keep the temperature target 1.5 degrees Celsius. But at the same time, this is the big picture, umbrella picture. But we have to work with the local communities, the people, because ours is the tourism economy in the high mountain. And because of this, glacial lakes, outbursts, floods, and other issues, people are very much affected. So, in order for the local people to adapt to the changing context, they need some early warning system. That is very important. So that's what people, local people are asking us how we can protect ourselves, how they know the catastrophe is going to happen. So that's why one thing I would strongly request ICIMOD and also request the global community, donor communities to support ICIMOD. Also request the scientific community like ICCI to support ICIMOD, which is our closest partner in scientific research and development. So early warning system is a major thing that we want now. So that people can stay there without any fear, and they know that something is happening. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. And because you have another commitment, so we just that is thank you for joining in the initial session. So next, I'll move to our distinguished panelists from Bhutan. Since we heard from Nepal and the risk associated with cryosphere changes, when you look into the HKH region, the risk and the changing cryosphere has different impacts. In the western region, we have more contribution from snow, and in the eastern, it's not that important as in the west, but the risk associated with growth and other kind of risks are different. So I would like to ask you, what, like in the country context, what are the major risks in Bhutan, and how is this affecting people in these communities, since you're also from that region and you have also been affected? So you could also share your experience in that context.
Okay. Thank you. Assuming that you have heard my introduction from Mr. Sher, I'll start my. I'll set a context by sharing a story. Actually, I come from a community where the climate change is really impacted. But before going to that, let me narrate a story. When I was growing, we used to hear a lot of songs people used to sing, and it is about the snow lion, the pride of the snow lion, because he has the den, the mountains that was snow-clad, like it is a snow-clad mountain, and he takes so much pride. After some years, the song has already changed. Now it's the snow lion is singing that I hear lots of snow-clad mountains high up in the Himalayas, but when I go there, I don't see any more snow. This narrative has already changed. The change in the narrative basically means that our Himalaya mountains have already lost the glaciers that it has. This has impacted both the livelihoods, the culture, and the sentiments of the people of Bhutan. So let me move here so that we don't keep it here. So in the last 30 years, I've seen a lot of change, and Bhutan has been impacted by the melting glaciers, the climate change. Our economy, the mainstay of our economy is hydropower. Our hydropower is getting impacted. Just I saw Dr. Merrim's presentation, the devastation it has caused. One GLOF outburst lake has caused damage, devastation to Bote Lake. Like that, in Bhutan, we have 567 potential GLOFs that is identified, and that one outburst could, in the last 10-20 years, we had an outburst of one of those lakes, and it has caused major destruction to the economy, lives, and the public infrastructure, and our agriculture was damaged. So, in this sense, I think Bhutan is being impacted. In fact, we have been trying to conserve the environment. We have constitutional mandate to keep 60% of our land under forest cover. And in Bhutan, we joke, like humans, trees have the constitutional right. But what we reap in return is not what we are supposed to get. We have done nothing. We have conserved forest. We have produced renewable energies, but in return we get the impact of the major impact of climate change, and that is impacting us. And our agriculture is being affected. Our water sources are drying up, and our hydropower plants are very much in risk. So these are some of the highlights. Just for this, these are the major impacts that we see. So just recently we had like in Nepal, we had a major flood in Thimphu, and it took away lives. Thank God it was during the daytime. Had it been during the night, the destruction would have been devastated, a large very, very much. So I would say climate change is a reality. We have to fight on an everyday basis. But Bhutan and its people has done nothing to contribute to this climate. Thank you for sharing your experience. So now I would like to move to Pakistan. Since here we hear from Miriam about the Karakoram, there was an anomaly, but now the pattern is also changing. So I would like to hear from Arif Goel Sahab to what are the communities that are more affected and what kind of changes, what are the major challenges posed by cryosphere in Pakistan?
First of all, good morning and thank you, ICIMOD, for organizing this panel discussion on a very important issue. It is said that water is life, and for Pakistan, glaciers are the lifeline for this water. We have more than 7,000 glaciers in Pakistan, small and in dollars one, even up to the 8,000 meters tall. uh, More than 60 to 70% of the water comes from glaciers, and that feeds into our Indus river system, upon which our all agriculture economy thrives. But due to the changes in the glaciers, in the climate change, the glaciers are receding, especially in the Hindu Kush and Himalayas. The rate of melting is very, very fast, and there we every year face incidents of the glacial lake outburst floods. The communities are vulnerable, but in terms of Karakoram, we usually say that this is an exception. I mean, there the rate of either the rate of glacier melting is low or they are not receding. But science is not clear because we in Pakistan are not having any weather station more than the elevation of 4,000 meters. So here comes the role of the science in determining what is the fate of the glacier of the Karakoram. Usually use the term Karakoram anomaly, but it may or may not be true. With having a background in science and coming from the scientific institute, that is my priority that we look in to meet the support of the institutions like ICI, like ICIMOD on these issues. But the communities due to these GLOF events are very, very much vulnerable. We have two projects on GLOF. Initially, outburst plot block 1 and block 2. Block 2 is funded by the GCF. That is most recently completed. We have the success stories too. But the rate of the change in climate and occurrence of the global events have superseded the interventions that we are trying to do. That is very, very alarming. We have some success stories as well, where we have made some community alerts. We have empowered communities on how to tackle these things, and we have made some infrastructure changes like Guardian Wall or like that. But unfortunately, I must say that the rate of the change is very much alarming. The tree line is shifting. The communities are at the mercy of these floods. Alert system is the need of the time. But the major thing I see is that is causing a transformation in the system. The snow that we were expecting in the months of October, November, and December is no longer there. It comes in the months of January, and from February it comes the heat waves. So most of the proportion of the snow it turns into floods. So we are to save the life, we are to change our agriculture pattern over there, we are to conserve water, and we are to save all this ecosystem wherein the biodiversity is there. So these are the challenges that Pakistan is currently facing.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us broad overview of what is going on. So I will come now to China, and China has a lot of experience in terms of monitoring cryosphere in Tibetan Plateau and also in climate change. So, and Professor Wen Jiedong has an extensive experience in climate change, and he is also from these mountainous regions himself, so he could also share his personal experience as well. So I'd like to know what the major challenges because of the climate change that are happening in Tibetan Plateau, and what terms it's affecting the economy of China and livelihood of people in China.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Actually, my hometown is in the northwest part of China, Gansu. It's in the Tibetan Plateau. It's about 2,000 meters high. And when I was at my age, we have a river named Weihe. Now it's a very big river. In the summer, we can swim. But now, after 20, 30 years, when I come back to my hometown, the river is very, very small. Almost you can't see it. And I think that this main cause, the reason is just as the vegetation is because glacier melting, and then it's come over the peak zone. Now it's almost a glacier, smaller to mid-sized glaciers disappeared. So low water resources. And further, due to the climate change, when I was working in the Lanzhou Institute of Plateau and Atmospheric, we found that in that time, although global warming is for the all global world, but for the high mountain, wet plateau, there are two special. One is the temperature increase phase is early. This is the other phase is around. This is the first. And the second is marked by the global average temperature increase. If for the global average, in the 10 years, they're 0.1 or something like that. But for the Tibet Plateau, it's almost for 10 years, 0.2 or 0.3. This is due to the glacial and slow because refractory ratio decrease and a very strong positive feedback makes that temperature in Tibet Plateau increase more times the other place. So which makes that the glacial melting and less glacial sand. And so another reason that for the water, if they have a temperature climate, it's natural and smoothly changed, their water is resources. It's good for human, for our farming, for our industrial experience. But if we have the climate or temperature events, then which means that the water will fast, will melt very, very fast, and then become flooding. And then the water not resources, but become disaster. And after the flooding, there are no water because there are no glacier. It's dry. This is why IPCC gives a conclusion that dry place get drier. This is something happened in my hometown. And now, many people in village, in rural region, moved to the city. And also, in China, we call it Dagong. I don't know in Dagong. Dagong means that farmers go to the main cities on the job there.
Migration.
Yeah, migration. And so now the village lived only the old older people and their children. And the young man all moved to the city. This is not bad because in the main city they have found their job and make more income, high salary, so that they send it back to the hometown for their parents and their children. And now another way is that for the industry, because the original farmer economy can't survive the people there. So they become industry, green industry or something. If now you go to my hometown, you will always find some wonderful solar power? Yes, sorry. In my hometown, if you in a flat, you always see a lot of solar power.
Yeah, solar power, I guess.
Yeah, solar power, and also for the windmill, for electricity. Something.
So now I'll go to the second round. In the first round, we were discussing about the vulnerabilities, impacts of changing cryosphere, but we also should think about the solutions and policies. So, what kind of policies do we need to reduce these vulnerabilities, and how can regional cooperation enhance these policies and reduce vulnerabilities?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, you-
Okay. I think human by ingenuity is very good in coming up with the policies. I'm not concerned about that, and Bhutan is not concerned about that. People can come up with any kind of solution, but what we are concerned is what is the political will? What is the position of the leaders? Do our leaders have that political will to come together, bring together people around the region to work for the common cause? That is one priority for Bhutan. And the next is, do you have the resource to put the policy in place? Do you have the resource to implement the provisions of the policies to fight climate change and melting glaciers? And if we do not have, what do we do it? So this is our concern. So I think the first thing is the political will. Our leaders have to come together. Next is we have to have resources. If we do not have, I think we have to find a solution to coming up with resource to combat and then fight climate change. And third is look into ourselves now and think for the future, so that we have this great mountains that has snow on it to be given to our younger generations to come. So these are the three things that I would like to highlight. Thank you.
So, in addition to this, like in terms of regional cooperation, how could it be enhanced? If you could also just share about regional context and regional cooperation.
I think the Hindu Kush Himalayan region is already coming together through ICIMOD, I think, and then these are some of the areas and some of the institutions, prominent institutions that can bring us together. So I would say ICIMOD is doing fine, and if there are any institutions that would like to come together, I think we have to keep our arms open and then welcome them, so that we all together work for a common cause. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to also put the same question to Araghvir sir, and in context of Pakistan, what are the policies and what the government is doing to reduce the vulnerabilities of communities, and how could we improve this in future? How could we reduce this?
I see this question in two contexts. Number one is in the Pakistan context. Here in Pakistan, see the resolve or will is there, but I see a disconnect of science with the policy and policy to action. So until and unless these three segments are at the same pace, we can't do it. The studies are there in isolation, the government policies are there, but the enactment on the other side is not there. So that's the reason that we have not done so far. Someone has said the dogmas of quite past are inadequate for the stormy present. We are to act anew, we must think anew. So business as usual model will not work. We need to build policies in a coherent manner. The policies of agriculture, water, glacier, energy should talk to each other at the national level. This is a major concern. Secondly, as I earlier talked about that, science is not clear about the third. And it's not only I am saying so, the IPCC reports itself says so about the third zone. Here comes the international context or the regional context. We have ICIMOD, ICIMOD is functioning well, but the outreach of the ICIMOD in making or sensitizing our political leaders for action is not as required. So besides science, they also need to delve into the political dialogues with the host countries, and then we can come up with a robust plan, rather a new vision to save the third pole. And this is my request to EC board to delve into this sort of discussion at the strategic level and come up with a new plan of work.
Thank you very much. So now we have another distinguished professor, Professor Dong Jiang, who is from the Chinese Institution of Science and Technology. He also have a project in the Indus Basin, working on the water shortage, but also have experience of climate change and also the Tibetan Plateau region. So I would like to request him to talk about the project that he is doing in the Indus, and also in context of China, what we need to do to reduce the vulnerabilities and risk in the downstream in China.
Yeah, true. First, I would like to introduce myself, and I'm working. 10 years ago, I'm working in the China Meteorological Organization for National Climate Center as a chief scientist, and I spent nearly 15 years working for IPCC, working for IPCC AR5, working group 2, working chapter for water resources, chapter 3, AR5, but AR6, I'm working for the chapter 16, key risks and regional across the not Asia chapter, but I'm working for the key risk and key risk. I forgot the chapters. Chapter 16. Then mainly working, and after that I'm got a project called working for the long time working for the industry reason, and funded by UNEP and National Science Foundation of China. We plan to working for the water shortage from the water supply point of view and the water usage point of view. And also we try to find the changing point in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, find how the snow cover changes and glacier changes, and also water supply changes, the changing tipping point. And also we try to connect it to the people, local people using water, how much water can be used for the agriculture, for the people life, and then we make comparisons like a trade-off, water supply and water usage, and to get some idea about how their situation was or not, and so on. For working for the water supply, we're using acceptable using the climate models. We are specialists for climate model, hydrological models, and with the module of glacier melting and also permafrost melting modules in the hydrological models. And this was our innovation side. Another innovation side, we developed SSP population and GDPs in future. We forecasting the future population changes and forecasting the land use change, forecasting of the GDPs changes up to the 2,100 in the full industrial regions, not only for 4 countries, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, China part, and the India part. All the Indus River basin scale research. We are based all the 4 countries to be involved in our big project, and so currently we are just finished our water supply. And the water usage part we are planning to slowly develop now. And we are also finished to the population increasing, population in future, and also GDP in future. This is we are trying to provide science-based information for the local government, like Pakistan government, Indian government, and Afghan government, or China government, to how much water will be supplied, existing or supply in future, and how much water can be used in future. So they will offer this scientific report. Then they can make a deal with different countries and different. They want, as I was told, I was 10 times visited to the industry basin, 10 times. And talking to local governments and leaders, they want to, as you know, there's a treaty of the United States in the industrial basin, organized by Pakistan there and World Bank. So they want to change the treaty now. So, but they asked me to give assistance. But I said we can give you the scientific data support your treaty, discuss political diction. But from our side, we were providing scientific information, also including the vulnerability analysis in all the river basins. So first, scientific data is very important.
Thank you very much for giving this overview of the project that we are doing. So now, before closing, I would like to request the audience if they have any question to it, but the discussion was going on, so if you would like to have any question, any feedback on the discussion that was here, the floor is open for questions.
I have a question. I'm Georgina Candlekamp from the International Development Research Center. I was just wondering your point about this perennial problem of the separation between science and policy and action. You were sort of urging ICIMOD to connect to these more strategic spaces. And I mean, this has been a problem forever. And I was wondering also, what is the government's responsibility with regard to closing that gap? Or how else do we think about it? Because it's been there for so long, and despite everyone's best intentions to close that gap, we're not seeing it being closed. So it's a question to everyone, I guess. But are there new ways for us to think about closing the science policy gap to maybe get us out of our old ways of working?
On science policy in access, uh, usually the politicians think that science contains many ifs and buts. The professor will quote me on this. So policymakers' direction is in the sense that whatever we say it is clear. The guidelines should be clear. The action that we develop as a sort of the policy document that should be. But science talks about ifs and buts. Ifs and buts, mostly the politicians and the policymakers don't want to listen. So this is the first point of contact. We need to set, as a scientist, some concrete options that are to be taken part by the policymakers as part of the policy process. This is at the end of the scientist. We, as a scientist, are sometimes unable to make clear stance before the policy. Then policy process in itself is triggered by different dimensions, different political wills. If these policy wills are not tagged with the scientific dimensions, then again there is a discoherence between. And it is the challenge, mostly in the science of climate change, that the policies are in isolation. Especially I will talk in the context of the Pakistan and in the context of the developing world. In the agriculture policy, there is hardly one or two times the word of climate change. Yes. There is no use of the word glaciers or the glacier as a source for water supply to that region. Similarly, when I talk about the water policy in Pakistan, doesn't talk vehemently about the glaciers as a main source of the policy. So here I see there is a disconnect over there. And then when these policies are translated into action plans, we are a system, political system, where we have the 6 federating units in Pakistan. So these policies are translated in the provinces. They have their own versions of action plans that stem from their own provincial will. So again, there is a disconnect over there. So this was the main I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, can I add? Earlier, I was talking about the leadership, and of course, Doctor has already shared it. But one problem with the science policy and leadership action nexus is because our leadership is on roll. They change. Our system also gets changed with the coming up of a new set of people. So I think to solve this problem for once and for all, I think we have to go for an institutional setup. The institution that can really act as an anchor to this problem, so that it holds onto it, it acts on it, and then make it coherent. So if we have to live on the leaders that change every 5 years, and then institutions that change according to the, policies according to the coming and going of people, it won't work. So that has to be an institution that has to be a heavy anchor to this institution to take up, not for one country, but at least for the SKH region to start with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we are coming to the conclusion of this session, but we have a follow-up session at 11:30. My colleague will be hosting it, and then here we are talking about more about risk and vulnerabilities and impacts, but there we'll be also talking about some solution, anticipatory adaptation. So if you are able to join, you are welcome you to join this session as well. So thank you very much, and thanks to all the distinguished panelists for joining us today. So with this, I will close the session.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if we have a group photo here.